different ways of saying you in Japanese and how and when to use them. Since there are so many ways of saying you, I'm going to split this video into 3 parts. In this video, I'm going to cover anata and anta. So let's start off with the word most commonly taught to beginners of Japanese, anata. Despite most textbooks and websites and who knows what else telling you that anata means you, it's not quite as easy to use as they make it out to be. The first thing you should know about anata is that you should only really say it if you don't know a person's name. ねえ、あなたの名前なんて言うの? 俺? If you know the person's name, it's best to avoid using anata, since it sounds unnatural to call someone anata when you already know who they are. Unless you're a couple. A lot of couples tend to call each other anata as a term of endearment, similar to the cringe-worthy darling or honey in English. あなた、私のこと好きでしょ? まあね. Of course, it isn't always said in a flattering way, so you might want to keep an ear out for the tone in which it's said. あなた、ちゃんと言いなさいよ! 好きだよ. Surveys and questionnaires also tend to use anata, since they can't possibly know the name of every individual reader.
あなたは今日結婚します。あなたの隣にいる人物は誰ですか?
Although it's perfectly acceptable to use anata in a formal situation like this, there are some times when it can come off as incredibly rude. If you say anata to someone in a higher position than you, for example, it can be interpreted as impolite and could offend.
この文章は大丈夫だと思いますか? あなたはどう思いますか? 私はあなたじゃないです。先生です。
This is why it's incredibly important to be careful and aware of whom it's acceptable to call anata. Another way of saying you in Japanese is anta. Although anta comes from anata, it's not as polite. So I would not advise saying this to someone you've only just met. It's often used within family. Elder family members in particular say anta when talking to the younger members of their family.
今日はあんたの食べたいものにしよう。ありがとうばあちゃん。じゃあ、じゃがいもにしましょう。
Friends also refer to each other as anta on occasion. This is particularly common in the Kansai area of Japan, it seems. However, you have to be careful with this because some people don't like being called anta by their friends.
あんた何してんの?
あんたって言うなよ. The reason why some people don't like being called anta is because anta can also be said in a derogatory way.
あんた誰?
That being said, anta can also be used by couples in the same way anata is used. However, it really depends on the people. The same with friends. Some people don't like being called anta by their loved one because of the derogatory connotations it holds. So you may end up getting a punch in the face depending on your partner's personal feelings towards the word.
あんた何やってんの? 初めてあんたって言われた。嬉しい。
So these are the uses of anata and anta. To find out how to use kimi and omae, click here to watch part 2. Part 2 of my video series on how to say you in Japanese. In this video, I'm going to tell you about kimi and omae. Let's start with kimi. Many people learning Japanese believe that kimi is only used by men, since this was its original use. Though it is primarily used by men, these days women have also started to use it. One of the most common places to hear kimi is in the workplace. It's often said by people with higher status to those with lower status to show authority. So it's not unusual for a boss to call their subordinates kimi.
Kimi, この書類頼むよ.
However, the place most foreigners with an interest in Japan will probably have heard kimi being used is affectionately in songs and dramas.
君のこと好きかも.
This may be why, as well as anata and anta, some couples call each other kimi. Again, you really need to be careful with this, since some people only think of kimi as being used by someone of authority, so they may think you're looking down on them.
君コーヒー入れてくれないか? 私はあなたの部下じゃないから.
Another reason why some people may not like being called kimi is because it tends to be used by sleazy guys when they hit on girls.
君かわいいね. ありがとうございます.
Another Japanese word for you that you may have heard of is omae. Like kimi, omae tends to be used more by males than females. Omae in particular is not a very ladylike thing to say. However, these days girls have started to use it too. But if you're a girl and you want to be thought of in a good light, then I'd advise staying away from this particular word. Long, long ago, omae was an incredibly polite way of referring to someone, hence why it has the polite o at the beginning of it. But these days, omae is quite the opposite. The majority of the time, omae is used in a derogatory way.
私ね、先週ね、買い物行って、この指輪見つけて、可愛いなって思って買っちゃったんだけどさ。うるせえよ、お前。
However, omae isn't always taken offensively. It's common for men in particular to call their close friends omae in a friendly, joking way.
あ、アイコだ。お前バカだな。
Like every other Japanese word meaning you so far, omae can also be used by couples. Many guys call their girlfriends or wives omae. But like anta and kimi, it's not always well received. Since omae is most commonly used in a derogatory way, some girls have an explicit hatred of being referred to in this manner.
ただいま。おう、お前帰るの早いな。離婚。ちょっと待ってよ。
Then again, there are those who love it.
お前何やってんの？初めてお前って言われた。嬉しい。
So those are the uses of kimi and omae. To find out how to use teme, sochira and sochi, click here to watch part 3.
If you found this video useful, please comment, like and subscribe.